Hello, and welcome back to Avon Talks. Today I am joined by Cody and Paul Rotondo of the Prince Thomas of Savoy Society, which is an Italian social club with over a century of history located right here in Avon, Connecticut. How are you guys doing today?
Excellent.
Very
Thanks for
good.
having us.
Indeed.
So, right off the bat, how did you two get into the Italian social club?
Well, I should probably let Paul take that at this point, at least to start.
Well, we had different journeys. Mine started at a very young age. My grandfather was one of the founders of the club. We used to come to the club to watch him play bocce and be his guest. He would bring his family down, and that goes back to like the 1950s. So that was my exposure to the club as a young child with my family and other Italian families in Avon who were part of the club.
So for me, I was actually a guest of one of our members who his grandson had played baseball with my son in Simsbury, and the grandfathers would always say, while they were watching the baseball game, "Hey, yeah, we're going over to the club tonight. We got to go over to the club tonight. We're playing bocce." And so after a couple of years, they finally got us to go to an event that was over there, and it was pretty neat because my family originally they landed in Ellis Island back in the 1900s, 1920, and they ended up in Enfield, Connecticut. So we all grew up very tight-knit Italian family with a lot of Italian culture. And when we found out there was an Italian club that was 10 minutes from my house, it was kind of a neat thing. So I came down and met all the people there, and it was fantastic. It was, when you meet the people who are there, it's almost as if you have a second family, and everyone's super welcoming, and I mean it was really a neat thing. So that's how I ended up. I joined the club just about 10 years ago.
And following up on that, so you're in the club, you were invited, whether that's, through a relation of your father or invited as a guest. Why did you decide to become so invested within the club that you would decide to take on more responsibility as, both of you have positions within the club, leadership positions within the club now?
Right. Well, for me, it was, when I had joined, Paul was the president of the club, and he did an excellent job, and I would come to the meetings, and he was very engaging, and you could see that he had passion and commitment to, the things that were good about the club pertaining to the Italian heritage and being involved in the community and family. So it made me want to be involved and help. I had different background within different businesses that I was involved with, and so, for me, I wanted to get involved to help the club so that we could kind of go to the next level. But the foundation that Paul had put the club in at the time was he was our president of the club during our centennial. So that's, it was a big thing for the club from the standpoint of, from a historical standpoint. And the other thing is, which is really a cool thing and very inspiring to a lot of us who are members now, is Paul's family is a legacy. He's a legacy member. So not only is he a past president, but when his grandfather is one of the founders, it's kind of a cool thing. So that's really why I became involved. We had a really good core of officers. Paul gave me the opportunity to serve on his board with membership, which I thought was great. And then we started to just do other things. Again, it is a social club, so we'd have activities, and he'd let me be involved in planning. And so it's just been kind of a natural progression for me.
Funny thing is, I spent a lot of my youth at the club. But then as I got older, I didn't go to the club for many years. I had started my own life and stuff like that, moved away from the area. And I didn't really come back to the club until I was going to retire in 16, 17 years ago. At that point, I was seeing people that I knew I was retiring. Actually, at a funeral of one of my uncles, some of his old friends came up and he said, "Paul, why don't you join the club? We need an infusion of some younger people."
Mm-hmm.
So I considered it. I knew I had some time, so I decided to join the club. And once I joined the club, I got in on the board and eventually served in many capacities until I ran for president and served for 2 terms. But I do want to mention about Chris. One of the things we were facing at the time when I became president, which was our centennial year, was we were losing younger people.
Mm-hmm.
And the older people were getting, who'd run the club for years, were getting older and they were losing energy. And so we had a little bit of a need to re-energize the club.
Mm-hmm.
And Chris came in and, just demonstrated this incredible energy, him and his lovely wife. And they had a large group of friends who all kind of joined at the club at the same time. And Chris was responsible to take the initiative to do a lot of new activities, to really ramp up the social aspects of the club and bring in bodies and people with interest, because he has that kind of personality. So Chris was a great addition to the club and brought it along to where it is now.
How did you go about doing that?
Well, I think the first part is anyone who goes and visits the club recognizes it's kind of a hidden gem.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the things that we find when we talk to people is that there's people who've lived in town for 20, 25, 30 years, and they tell us stories about how they would drive by the club and always wonder, what is this brick building and what's going on over there. So, as an example, probably on an unofficial capacity, we probably have the largest bocce league in the state of Connecticut that's organized, right? So we have men's bocce during the summer 3 nights a week. The league is over 110 members. We have women's auxiliary that plays on Mondays and Fridays, and they have a league that's close to 60 members. So between the two, you have over 150 active members just in a bocce league. So there's always something going on. So when people drive by, they think that there's always some kind of a party or a social event. So it's kind of a neat thing. So from that standpoint, once the bocce league started to grow, that's kind of the cornerstone to our club. And we're a social club, so we have a lounge, and we do had dinner dances, and there was a lot of history with regard to the membership. And the women's auxiliary would do an Italian food fair every year in October, which kind of gained a tremendous following in the town. People would look forward to that. You'd be able to get fresh pasta and fresh sauces, and come into an Italian cafe. So when we started to look at all those things, what we found is that it was just the kind of place where people were interested to come in. The cost of the membership is pretty reasonable. So people would come and they would look at it, and the value of the membership would be that they'd be able to come to these activities, these social events, whether it's dinner dances or outdoor shows, or for the last 3 years, this will be our 3rd year, we're doing an Italian festival that takes place this year in September, which is great. It's open to the community. We look at it kind of as Farmington Valley's Italian festival to celebrate Italian heritage. So the more that people came on site, the more that they really liked it. They liked the bocce courts. We had a pavilion. Within the last few years, we had a donation by one of our members. The Regenti family donated a brick oven for brick oven pizzas that's outside. We have a new patio. We do 2 golf tournaments a year that we invite our members and guests to come to. So it's been really something that's active, and no matter how old the members are, from people who are really young in their 20s to people who are in their 90s, all the events are really, they're aimed at their enjoyment, and we try to make sure that we include everyone. So I think that's kind of the key. I mean, for us, we've just identified things that people like to do. We've had Sinatra nights. We had Billy Joel tribute band last year. So there's always good things that are happening, so people feel like, again, whether they can come to the club and be part of it twice a year, or whether they're at the club 4 times a week, they enjoy it.
You think it's the activities that keep people coming back, or do you think it's maybe the because you talk of it as a hidden gem, what do you think makes it particularly special as a hidden gem? What is it that's...
I think the first part is that to know the Italian history, from the standpoint of immigrants coming from Italy, there's a commonality to how all of our families, for people who are Italian. Now, the first part of we should say is that for years and years, our club was founded by people from the Lake Garda area in Italy, which is the northern part of Italy. So what happens is for people who are Italian, at least, and now from the standpoint of people who had the history of growing up in an Italian family, I think that's one of the things, one of the driving forces that really bonds the club, is just, the I guess it's a thought where you reach back into the past and have a common understanding of what it was like around the holidays.
It's like a shared history that nobody else can really relate to. It's something that, not even people from Italy can relate to. It's just something that's very unique to the group of people that came to the Farmington Valley from Italy.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting from the standpoint. So the club was established in 1917, right? So there's a couple factors, obviously, from a historical standpoint. The United States is right in the middle of World War I. You have immigration from Italy, where a lot of the people who came from Italy were poor to start, and they were looking for a better life, and they came to the United States without really knowing what they were going to do. Our portion of how immigrants from Italy came to Avon had to do with a tragic accident that happened with Avon Fuse Company, which was purchased by Ensign Bickford. There was an explosion. They needed workers after that to fill the jobs because they lost people in the explosion. So they went to Ellis Island, and they were able to have people come up from Ellis Island to come to Avon. Avon, the population in Avon in 1920, right? So that's 3 years after the club was established, was about 1,500 people, right? So now, if you imagine how small that is, how rural that was, it was just a different environment. There was railroad tracks where the housing was built for the workers who worked at the factory. So all of the people who came to work in the factory were typically members of certain families that came over after they were here. They would send information to say, hey, listen, we have jobs over here, or friends. And little by little, that's really how the first group or first wave of people who came into Avon. But it started originally with 5 families who had made a commitment to, the first part is you come to a different country, you don't know the language, right? So you're working in a factory, you don't know the language. Your common bond is the people that you came over to the United States with. So it was really, at that point, it was to take care of each other. Little by little, as more people came over, they would join the society. I mean, at the time, that's what it was called. And it was, at the time, the commitment was to to take care of each other. I mean, they had paid a certain amount of money into a hat to get things started and kind of do their monthly meetings. But at the core, it was always about the families and about taking care of each other. I mean, beyond just, and I think that, that's part of what Paul touched on before. When people come down to the club, there's an investment of there's an emotional investment to the people who are there, in that most of the people, the difference probably between the social club and a country club, as an example, is that the country club has people who are hired to manage everything for the members. And our club, being that it's a social club, our members are responsible for everything that happens there, from the picking of the weeds to, the paying of the bills to, making sure the grass gets cut and the bocce courts are taken care of and the sidewalks are shoveled at some point. It's a big responsibility, and there's 400 members. So when we do events, it's our members who are taking care of each other.
New members have to make a commitment to do something to assist the club or to facilitate some kind of function or do something in addition to their dues. It's very much a, all hands on deck proposal where we all work together.
So, Paul, you already touched a little bit about the founding story of the club, but I think there's one part that was missing, and I think it's sort of the elephant in the room, but where exactly did the name Prince Thomas of Savoy come from?
That is, to this date,
well, it's interesting. Right?
Unsolved.
So the House of Savoy.
All
right, so we'll give you a quick historical perspective. House of Savoy was part of the Italian kingdom, right? So the Italian kingdom, if I'm not mistaken, dates back to like 1846. And Prince Thomas was a real person who was part of the House of Savoy. So the thought behind that was that when they came here, they started the society in his honor. So the unfortunate part is that we don't have anything in our charter that says this is who we named the club after. That's just kind of the folklore to it. Now, the interesting part, and then we talk about this, and this is kind of the interesting trivia question is, most people have heard of the margarita pizza. It's the first pizza that was ever made, right? And it was made for Queen Margherita of Italy, who was the sister of Prince Thomas of Savoy. So it's kind of one of those neat facts. If you dig back a little bit farther and get into the family, you find these things out.
Wait, when was Prince Thomas of Savoy alive?
So he would have been right around the just before the 1900s. Oh. So he was relatively young. So when the people who were coming here, I want to guess he was probably in his 30s or 40s at the time.
I'm assuming he was popular in Italy, or he was well known enough to have people name this club after him.
Well, again, I think because of the House of Savoy was in the northern part of Italy, and these families moved there, so that was one of the things that was kind of interesting.
It's difficult to say because there were 10 locations in Italy, and Savoy was one of them. How that prince of that Savoy fiefdom got the rights to name were probably some kind of backroom deal or some favor or something, but it was something that was undocumented. And the only time we knew it is when it became incorporated as part of the club name, and it was registered with the state of Connecticut. So it's a good, I think Chris's explanation is, I like the margarita pizza
that's
hook up because At least gives it a little color.
Everybody loves pizza.
Yeah.
Another thing that I find really fascinating about the club's history. So, right now we've talked about it was chartered and founded in 1917. By sorry, how many founding families were there? How many founding members?
Well, originally the story goes that there were five gentlemen who made a decision that they wanted to make a commitment to start us a society. But within a short amount of time, it had grown to 50 families pretty quickly, which were most of the workers. And and again, it was a different type of a situation for them because, as you said, I mean, you saw that was the ability to form the society gave them some commonality, a place to go, to spend time together, to have meals together. In a lot of the cases, and it's one of the things that's not really all that known when people talk about people who are immigrating. For a lot of the families, it was just the men who came over initially. So they left their families to come to try to make a living, try to get some money, and then their thought in some cases was that, at some point that they would go home. I don't know that everyone came to the United States back in the early 1900s with the thought that they were going to stay here and make a new world for themselves here. But then, things happened and the area grew, and from 1917 to the time where they started to actually build the building where we're at. I mean, we just had our 90th anniversary on the building. So, as Paul likes to say, one thing about Italians, right?
Yeah, if you give an Italian some mortar, some stone, he'll build you a palace.
So that's kind of, I mean, that's how we feel about our building. I mean, it's to us.
I think it's an accurate statement because throughout all of Avon, a lot of the buildings that are really historic, that are more significant, were built by members of this club, including our very own Avon Old Farms, which a lot of it was constructed
the brownstone.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Which I think I think it's fascinating, and it really ties the history of this club with the history of this town.
Well, when we had our centennial, the Avon Farm School was more than happy to generously donate their facility to us for our ball. We had a beautiful ball and dance dinner there, and they let us use their magnificent hall and everything, and gratis, just in honor of the contributions that the Italian Americans made to the school.
And one of the other major contributions that members of this club have made to the town of Avon, aside from building it, is they played a very active role within the community. They tried to. I remember we touched on this earlier. We discussed this earlier about how during the Second World War, a lot of people flocked to the chance to enlist and fight for the country. And there's even within Avon Town Center right now, there's a stone commemorating all these people. And part of that, I think, is interesting because now the Veteran of Foreign Wars post within Avon is housed in the building. So I was just wondering, how did this kind of come about? What was the cause behind this urge to serve the town?
I think the one thing that we knew, from even talking to members who now at this point, who's, we have some older members who've served in World War II and in Korea. But Paul and I, we've spoken about this before. It's just the fact that even though the Italians were only here for a short amount of time, and by that time it would probably be into 25 years. It's really the next generation. In some cases, they love the country by that time, and they were patriotic. So that's we talk about Italians and Italian Americans and how that works.
And in 2017, the club celebrated its 100-year anniversary. What was that like?
I mean, it was a pretty special time for us to. I mean, we knew as a group we were trying to put together some big things. So we had a gala, a ball that was at the Avon Old Farm School, which again, because of our history there, it was important for us to be able to go there, and we needed a place that we could have lots of people, because there was hundreds of people who came from our club, so that was important. That same year, we kind of wanted to get our name and put it on the map a little bit and celebrate as a club. So we took a shot at the Guinness Book of World Records to try to do the longest bocce match. And we were happy enough to be able to break the record. So we had what we call the Great Eight, who broke the record. They had the match. The match was 32 hours and 4 minutes. It was a pretty special year with lots of things going on.
We got a lot of good press for that bocce. I mean, the New York Times picked it up, for crying out loud. We got a lot of good press.
Yeah, it was picked up all over the world.
And that was the first year that you did the Sinatra night.
Yeah, I think
for the centennial.
Yeah.
So we had a bunch of great events to celebrate the first 100 years.
So we already touched up on a lot of what the club does today, just for its regular members, like the bocce tournaments and the dances and the golf tournament. What was it like in 1917, especially since it was mostly predominantly male and it was a relatively, tight-knit community back then, really tight-knit community? What was it like during those events?
Yeah, I mean, as Paul said, I think what you would find about the early years of the club is that it was really a much simpler life, right? So when you talk about, I mean, most of the pictures that we see when they gather, they were pretty formal. I mean, the guys, when they got together, they were in suits and ties. It's not what you would normally think of, but they were very proud of how they presented themselves. They would have long banquet tables outside where they'd have their picnic, and as Paul had mentioned, I mean, they'd have wine, and they really enjoyed each other's company.
Man, these guys were artisans. They all had huge gardens. They all had animals that they would process. They made cheeses. They made meats. They made wines. Everything was homemade. And with that, because also the area where you're from in Italy, all the food is very common to that area. So their pride, they have a tremendous pride, local pride in what they consume and what they eat and what they enjoy. So, that's probably a lot of it, was the ability to sit down with my neighbors and say, try this, or have some of my wine. And it was probably very competitive, knowing Italians.
And so, moving into today, what is it like to get membership? So I know that you guys opened it up to non-Italians.
I think most of the growth has been organic. What we find is that there's pockets of people who get invited, to an event, or they'll see an event and they want to come by. And when they come by, they learn a little bit about the club, and then they find out that they're interested in joining. And then when they join, they go and they tell their friends, "Hey, this is a great place. You should come and try." So it kind of comes in small waves. I think it's become a case where people recognize the club and some of the activities that we do, not only for the fun that we have, but we make a point to try to give back to the community. I think that's one of the things that's kind of a pillar or cornerstone of our club is we have a social responsibility to try to support our local businesses. I mean, we certainly try to help, as an example, Avon Food Pantry. We recognize, I think, as a club with our members, how fortunate we are to be in the position that we're in. So we want to make sure that when we have the opportunity to help other charities, that we do that. A lot of times it's just a case of when you look at the members and you find out who over the years has been involved with the club, they're people who are very active in giving back to the community outside of the club. I mean, they do that, but we have people who are involved in local government over the years. I mean, that's on a historical basis. We've had people who were involved from the fire department, the police department, the Avon town government, Simsbury government. So these are people who are all trying to make things better. I mean, I think that's one of the commonalities when you talk to people. People recognize that a lot of the events that we do, even though we're trying to have fun, we're trying to have fun to raise money or to raise food or to raise attention to other things.
Yeah, I mean that's one of the things that that we really talked about earlier when we met earlier is it's the community programs and the charity that the club does. And also I think and what I honestly find more impressive is how out of the limelight the club stays when doing all this work. Like when you guys do this community outreach with the food pantry, with the you guys have a scholarship program where you guys try to help send some kids to college. You guys don't really like go out into the news and say and try to take credit for everything that you do. You guys sort of do it just because this is it's part of giving back to the community, which is something that I
mean that's just the nature of the people who form the club. I mean, I think that there's a strong sense that we always want to leave the club better than we received it, and that kind of filters throughout the community. So I think that where we have the opportunity, it's not a choice. Where people come to us and they'll ask us if we can help, and when we can help, we help.
Well, that's very ties into the Italian culture too. You can't compliment an Italian person any higher than by calling them generous. So I think that's goes along with our mindset.
And you mentioned how you guys had membership all throughout, the Farmington Valley and sort of even within further reaches. I was wondering, I think one of the things that's really interesting about this club being within Connecticut and something that might be less well known within the general public is that Connecticut has one of the more vibrant Italian American populations in the entire country. And so with that, there are other, Italian American communities within the state. And I was wondering, how does this club work sort of in conjunction with these other communities, or do you guys do programming together?
You know what? That's a great question. I think that Connecticut right now, Connecticut over the years has been either the first or second highest percentage of population, which it ranges, I think, somewhere in the vicinity. Over the years, it's ranged from like 16 to 20%.
So Connecticut and Rhode
right?
Island.
Connecticut and Rhode Island, right?
Yeah.
And so from the standpoint of these clubs, there's some great long-standing Italian clubs, and ours is one of the older ones in Connecticut. Probably the largest one is the Ponte Club that's in Waterbury. It has close to 900 members. You have Unico. Unico started, I believe it's 100 years last year was their anniversary. There's a number of clubs that are down that started in the Franklin Avenue area. So for us, we do communicate and we support each other. We make a point to try to go to each other's events. A lot of our events are fundraising events, not only to support our club but to support other charities. So for us, it's a great opportunity, and when we can work on projects together, that's great. We had a number of Italian clubs come to our festival last year. Unico was there. There was two clubs from Farmington Avenue in Hartford, Connecticut. The Ponte Club has been over. We've had Italian dancers that are out of Southington that are part of the Sons of Italy, Sorel d'Italia in America. We just had an Italian Heritage Night at the Hartford Yard Goats. And what we've done is we've tried to incorporate where we can, bringing all of these groups together to share in the common bond that we have. So, all of them have different things. They have different festivals. We have our festival is a 2-day festival. The Mount Carmel Festival in Enfield is a 4-day festival. The Ponte Club they had their festival last week. Now it's got to the point where it's a 1-day festival. But at one time, years ago, they used to draw over 1 million people, and it was like the San Gennaro Festival in New York. On a little bit smaller scale. But to your point, there are a huge amount of population of Italians. I mean, right now I think I was reading New Haven has probably the highest percentage of Italian population, which is just over 20%, which is pretty amazing. I mean, now you look at it.
We got pretty good pizza there.
Yeah, they have some pretty good pizza there on Worcester Street. So.
I think that's pretty much all the time we have. Before we end, I was just wondering, is there anything that you guys are particularly excited about with upcoming events, or upcoming developments or goals of the club, anything like that?
Yeah, for us, we're right at the beginning of really starting to promote our Italian festival, La Festa Italiano. It's September 22nd and 23rd. Hat. That's right. Just in case we get video for this, we have the hat on, just as a reminder. But yeah, and that's our festival is really it's done in tribute to the festivals of old that used to be in Connecticut on Franklin Avenue, the ones that they have in New Haven, the ones that they had in Waterbury. They have a great festival in Southington. And so we don't even look at it from the standpoint that we're in competition with these festivals. We love to go and travel and go to their festivals and invite them to ours. The one thing that's great about the one that we have in Avon right now is that it's free. We want the community. We want to welcome them into our club and host them. And we have Italian singers and Italian dancers. And this year we have grape stomping contest, a meatball contest, a cheese rolling contest. We have 2 signature showcase bands at night that have huge followings in the area in New England. They've been Savage Brothers is out of Windsor Locks. They've been in music and doing entertainment in New England for like 30 years. We have Johnny Six Gun, which is out of the Enfield area. They have a large following. They just did a show at MGM just last weekend. So we're excited. We're excited to host the town. We hope people are going to come out. Hope they're going to come in, have some meatballs and grinders with us. We have Zupardi's. Zupardi's is from West Haven, one of the best pizzas in the country.
Yes.
They're involved in a big pizza competition in New York on Coney Island on the same day as our festival. So they have their trailer with us. They have their truck in New York. There could be a big announcement that they might have the best pizza in the country on the day that they're with us. That's fantastic.
When you go to these other festivals run by these other societies and clubs, throughout Connecticut. Is there any sense of like competition and rivalry when you do like bocce tournaments or?
Oh yeah,
Things like that?
Yeah, we're all friendly until we get into the bocce court. Yeah, I mean it's tremendous. It's amazing. We were fortunate enough. We went and we were invited to go and play at the Ponte Club in Waterbury earlier this year, and they have an amazing facility. They're tremendously gracious hosts. They invited us all. They made us lunch. We just had a really, really enjoyable day. Getting to talk to them, getting to know them. They had a great appreciation. They have an indoor bocce facility, and they're tremendously competitive. And they just, I mean, there's a great sense of respect when you see that people are kind of continuing to move the heritage and the culture forward. So they come to our events, and we had an event during the summer where we had a lobster palooza, and after dinner, we all got to the bocce court. At some point, the bocce courts are calling the members of our club, and we ended up having a match against them there. That night we went 1-1. So
Who's always the best in the state right now?
You know what? I mean, in all seriousness, the Ponte Club has players and has teams that have gone and won national competitions. I mean, they have some incredible players. So it's one of the things where you're honored to be on the same court with people when they're that good. Paul won't tell you, but he's a 3-time bocce champion of our club. So he just sits back there and he's waiting next week is our bocce championships. So it's a big thing. But yeah, those guys, they're pretty good. And so from a competitive standpoint, if there's a bocce court, there is someone in that club who wants to play someone in another club.
But they don't have a world record.
We had the world record. It was broken a few years ago, but it's not something that we think that will let them have forever.
Oh, so this is the real upcoming plan.
Speaking to your competitive nature, right? We'll let it out for a while.
So we'll wait until the time is right.
Yeah. Besides, no one's going to beat us in bocce on our own court. We're kings of our court.
This podcast is an Avon Historical Society production, edited by me, Ethan Guo. Special thanks to Priscilla Marshall for the graphics. If you'd like to support this podcast, please subscribe and leave a review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or wherever else podcasts are downloaded. Want to be featured on a future episode or stay up to date with the podcast newsletter? Feel free to reach out to us at avontalksahs@gmail.com. For more on the Avon Historical Society, visit www.avonhistoricalsociety.org.